Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, picking up with last episode, we learned that Jughead he actually has a superpower. He can read people's minds. Interestingly enough, he hasn't told anyone, didn't tell Tabitha. So being able to read people's minds, obviously your brain a lot of times will process and come up with stuff faster than you could actually, before it reaches your mouth. So all he has to do is listen to people's thoughts, and that kind of flows into their words. So he's able to end up getting a good enough baseline of what someone's going to say. I'm sure all he has to do is focus on their lips to occasionally. More often than not, he never has to worry about it because people are probably actively thinking about what they're going to say before they say it. Or even if it's just like a subconscious things that people do, our brains are thinking of the words before we say them. So it's a little easier for Jughead to kind of be like, right, I'm on top of this. I can follow people's words. But the problem is a big, giant hit piece about Riverdale comes out. From top to bottom, all the terrible stuff, the drugs, the crime, how the police aren't doing enough. Obviously, an attack on Reggie and Veronica about the casino and how it attracts. And at first I was like, Jughead made it clear, like, right, he hid the person's identity on purpose so that, there'll be no retaliation. So it needs to be a platform where someone can ever speak freely about the issues and the problems that are in Riverdale. But the problem is, it turns out the person responsible is our newcomer Percival, which it seems so interesting. And I wonder, is this the drawback to Archie's abilities? Because we're slowly getting into the realm of, with every ability, these abilities don't come for free, that there's a dual side to it. And I'm wondering, is the long run going to be that eventually Archie becomes, well, because he's impenetrable, but maybe it's just because he can't feel anything, but will he eventually become like Nathan from Haven? Nathan couldn't feel anything, not just pain. Like if he touched someone, he could not feel that sensation. So every sense of touch was gone. So what if Archie gets to that point where he can feel literally nothing? That might be the downside of his, because we got into it previously with Betty, where she's starting to get these headaches, and now we elaborate on that a little bit more later on when she returns, and it turns out she's sensitive to light now. So too much light stimulates her eyes, and it gives her headaches. So, and I guess like the more she has her power, the more she uses it, probably the worse that's going to get, to the point. It makes you wonder, would there ever be a dual side to that where, well, an even bigger dual edge where that even eventually seeing the aura of other people would become painful to her? Or are we going to go to the point that it becomes such a deterrent for her that, well, because Jughead ended up losing his hearing to gain this ability. What if, once again, we're getting that with Archie and Betty, what if Betty in the long run is going to lose her sight? Like having the sight to see people's aura, it's like you have this sixth sense, this sixth sight. So the sixth sense type of sight that maybe eventually is going to take its toll. Or it might even be like a thing of, maybe it won't necessarily in the long run make her blind, which I definitely could feel that being the route. It could simply be that, hey, it causes just some form of brain damage. Like there's going to be some backlash to it. Like, nothing in life comes for free, right? So, but my other thing I was thinking too is, because Archie's kind of getting very aggro, but to be fair, Archie's always had like, everything that's happened in Riverdale has fostered a lot of anger in him. Going off the war, I'm sure did something to him, what he lost, and he came to terms with a lot of that, but now having this power, I don't know, like Archie's always had that, not necessarily a chip on his shoulder, but there is a little bit of darkness in him. The brightest lights cast the deepest and darkest shadows. So that's always been like this dual side to Archie, that he does have some darkness in him, and I'm wondering, is he more aggro now that he has his invulnerability, his indestructibility? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But I do like that it feels like they're kind of making, once again, tying this back into Riverdale. It seems like Percival is playing the devil role, where he's whispering in people's ears and pointing them down a direction. Obviously, his family has ties to all that is Riverdale. Obviously, his family's done some shady stuff in the past, to the point Tony's like, you're right, your family genocided my family. But interestingly enough, Abigail is willing to work with him because she wants Riverdale, Riverdale's been built off the foundations of like what happened to her and the evil that was done to her. She wants to return it to the town and the families mostly responsible, that being Betty's family, Archie's family, and Jughead's family. So she's willing to join forces with Percival, which I'm like, don't think that's a good idea. Last thing you want is him whispering in your ear and pushing you down a certain route. But from the very beginning, it just seemed like I said, I was like, is he supposed to be the devil in this particular regard? Like the literal devil, just like in Riverdale. Because first and foremost, there's a guy who kills himself at the casino. And it's like, why would he do that? He was up 20 grand. While all of a sudden, you just rewinding the tapes, it seems that Percival was there whispering in his ears. Then when they're eventually going down Sketch Alley, Doc has this like blank look in his eyes. Like, I was like, that's weird. And he just suddenly ends up attacking Kevin for no real reason. So everything starts seeming odd there, because this all stems from a lot of Percival presents that thing of, right, there's this homeless epidemic that's happening here in Riverdale, and that's contributing to like the drugs and all this other stuff, you know. And his solution is to bust them out, which isn't an actual solution. It's more out of sight, out of mind. As long as we don't have to look at it and think about it, it's fine. But it's like, right, anyone who's in those circumstances are there for different reasons, whether it's some mental health reasons sadly led them there, whether it's just life in general didn't work out, job-wise, lost their homes, because everyone that's there has a story. Percival's trying to paint it like, right, he's trying to use like what would be probably like the smallest amount. Like if you were to do it percentage-wise, I'm sure the statistics exist in the real world for it, but I'm sure he's using like the minority to represent the majority, saying like, oh, you give them like all the homeless want are a handout. It's like, that's not always the case. Like people are going through something and they just sometimes need a helping hand. Homeless situation is, you know, obviously it's a topic in Riverdale, but obviously it's a real world topic too on how to deal with that situation, you know? And I don't think I have this. I don't know, like, you know, I haven't listened to everyone's perspective on it. I don't think there's a perfect solution for it. And I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I have the solution for it. It's easy to recognize issues without having an actual solving problem issue. And I love that Percival says, like, okay, this is my idea. What's your idea, Archie? And he's like, I have one. It's like, he tried to put Archie on the spot because it's like, right, here you are nitpicking my solutions, but did you bring something to the table? That's always the thing. Like, oh, you'll bring up issues, these problems, because Archie was suggesting, no, these people in Sketch Alley, they're not bad people. They're people in hard times. They're us. They're just as much citizens of Riverdale as we are. But the problem is Archie didn't have a solution, and that's all that matters. Is like, oh, I have a solution. You don't. Like, so you might not agree with it, but I don't see you coming up with a counterpoint and a counterplan. So that ends up being the whole thing. But like I said, it's more of an out of sight, out of mind, because let's just ship them out. It's like, that doesn't fix the problem. It's just like, but yeah, we're making that someone else's problem. If they end up homeless in another town, that's going to make that town worse. But it's like, Riverdale's property values are going to go up because Riverdale still hasn't fully bounced back from the time skip of just everything that Hiram did to choke the life out of this town. For like, the town fully hasn't fully bounced back from that yet. So it makes an opportunity for some other villain to step in, fill in the shoes that Hiram left high and dry. And whereas Hiram presented himself as a villain, he never, like, he might try to pretend here and there, like, oh, I'm doing this for, but Percival is definitely trying to pretend to be the angel on your shoulder, your guardian angel, while he's secretly the devil on your shoulder, whispering bad stuff in your ear, pushing you to do stuff. Ultimately, Archie and Jughead work together because Jughead thinks about, you know, the little... And I think this is a real world thing that has happened, like making little homes. They're not full blown homes, but little model homes for the homeless, so that it actually gives them a place to stay instead of just living on the street, and having that jumping off point makes them feel like, you know, being able to, you know, have the security and feel like you're being seen, that you're part of the community, like, could help put them on the right position in the right circumstances. So, but at every turn, Percival is shutting down so much that Veronica and Reggie are already struggling, because it's not the entire council, but it's mainly Alice, which, once again, it's complicated because Alice has always had those holier than thou, like, perspective on things. It's so interesting, like, because Alice makes it seem, and I think that's the complication with the character, she always makes it seem like her shit don't stink. She's got a complicated family circumstance. Like, you want to drag up everyone else's family issues. At no point did Veronica throw some of your family issues in your face, like, you married a serial killer. One of your son ended up being a serial killer too. In fact, associated with a scammer and killer. So you're also part of the whole farm situation where you're part of a cult. To be fair, a lot of people, they know we're part of that. So it's like, it's not the best example to use, but Alice hasn't always been, like, the best person, so it's kind of hypocritical to throw all this shade, but it's because Alice always looked at herself as better. But you also can't blame the daughter for the sins of the father. Veronica has always done, that's also the thing of, like, and it feels so interesting considering you're dogpiling on Veronica, who stood with you when it came to ostracizing her father from this town. You're like, but you won't give her the time of day. She already had her issues with the casino and everything like that before, sure, but you came together as a community and everything. She was there with help leading the charge, and you're gonna, like, treat her just a lodge. It just seems hypocritical and super messed up. But once again, that's the complexities of that character, that she's able to call everyone else out, never recognizing her own issues. But also she has Percival whispering in her ears, like, right, using Polly's tragedy, being like, right, if it wasn't for this situation being what it is, what happened to Polly never would have happened. But it doesn't just deal with the homeless epidemic. Like, the fact is, Riverdale's always had its darkness in some shape or form. These tragedies were always going to exist. You're just using this as an outlet, but there was always some darkness, you know. But Alice would be like, whatever, that's just some, like, fancy speak. That's just someone speaking in soliloquies. That there's no, like, it's metaphors and soliloquies is all it's being. But it's like, no, there's a literal darkness in the foundation that is Riverdale. There's been so much death and destruction way before, over the course of this series, that we've seen distantly in the past. There's just been so much. I mean, that past is rearing its ugly head with Abigail's return. So further proof of that. So and what makes it sad too is that Veronica tried to go legit. It's like, right, I'm going to prove that I am not my father. We won't do things the way he wants. Which Reggie's like, okay, I admire the sentiment in theory, but we can't run the business like that. In fact, we literally can't. Well, we can, but we will not turn a profit. Not anytime soon. Maybe with these calculations, ever. Because the amount of money they need to run this place legitimately makes you wonder. I guess because it's a small town of Riverdale, like, other casinos had the benefit of being in big places, being attractions and stuff. So getting in, you know, customers of all kinds, no limitations on them, allows them to kind of make the massive profits that they do. I'm making that assumption. I'm assuming a lot of casinos, not all, but I'd assume a lot of casinos are super profitable. Unfortunately, they're in Riverdale, and they've got the stipulations to try and be on the up and up, not have any shady customers. But the moment Alice made it super clear that, the only way the council will say okay to the casino is if Veronica backs away from the front of it. And I was like, what are we going to do? Set up? Is Alice going to be like the person in charge to make sure it keeps its moral upstanding, or is it Percival going to swoop in and be like, oh, I'll be the one to lead this down the right path? Is that what we're going to have? I think that's interesting because this is continuing the Riverdale dynamic of she was originally going to give Satan Alice's soul, but backed out at the last second, ironically ended up no, because she ends up giving Reggie the devil's soul, but also like it's because Reggie had sold her soul to the devil, that whole thing. But it's interesting still getting those parallels here. But it's also like, I think that just shows kind of a bit of abuse of power, because Veronica tried to present things like, oh, we're going to make this the new Atlantic City. We're going to have like an arcade and like a baby, like trying to mitigate it to make it a little more family friendly, enough approachable that not only will people in Riverdale be able to use it and take care of it without too much issue, but it could also draw in other people, making it kind of a site of an attraction within Riverdale. But Alice kept fighting them at every point, and it just feels a little... And maybe the rest of the council feels that way, I don't know. Because even with the project that Archie came with, like, hey, we'll build these houses, everyone else was on board. Tabitha, Tony, and Frank, but Alice ended up being that holdout yet again, so... But that's also because, once again, Percival got to her, just like he ended up getting to Sheriff Keller and Kevin, and now he's even going to be joining them as... So, last thing you need is a megalomaniac who was eventually... The moment we got introduced to him and found out that he has superpowers too, I was like, oh, supervillain. And even Archie's like, man, he's like a supervillain. And Jughead's like, yeah, he kind of is. And I was like, that's fascinating. It's like, right, you guys are superheroes, so of course you would be supervillains. So we know they got their powers from the explosion. Where did he get his? Is the big old question. So I'm definitely getting... I had to look his name up because I couldn't remember Kilgrave. Because in my head I was thinking Purple Man, because I recently was listening to someone referencing Jessica Jones, and they reference him by like his name of Purple Man instead of like Kilgrave. So that kind of threw me for a loop. I was just about to say like, oh, David Tennant's character, but like I said, I had to look it up. But I could definitely get a little bit of Kilgrave vibes from Percival. The whole British thing too kind of makes you go, yeah, adds even more to that. So... And we all saw how Kilgrave handled the ability to be able to push people, and how he handled that. And Percival definitely seems like he's along that lane of like, I'm going to do what I need to get what I want. He definitely seems like I don't care who I have to hurt or what terrible things I have to do in the process. He ended up getting Sheriff Keller as well as Kevin to help him remove the everyone from Sketch Alley. Once again, it's not a real solution. It's, oh, give everyone $100 and move them on their way. Because Percival's also trying to prove a point to Archie that, oh, people want to keep up this front of like, oh, they care, but no, they don't want anything disgusting or whatever that could bring down their value or get rid of the comfort. They want to pretend like they are good people without disrupting the comfort of their own lives. But Archie believed he was more hopeful, and he's like, right, you have a very cynical view. He's like, the people of Riverdale aren't like that. But Jughead was kind of hearing some of their thoughts, and it kind of played into what Percival was saying. But also, Archie was right, because when things were down and out, Tabitha, Tony, as well as Frank and Jughead all helped out when those houses got tagged, and Archie's like, what are you guys doing? I was going to tear these down, but they're like, no, we're invested in this project. You know, even with everything going on, Tabitha was still like all in too, because the bad publicity made it, because the whole point was to paint them like the White Worm or Pops. And Tony had to back away from that, because she's like, right, would you still take our support considering we're criminals, gang members? He's like, that doesn't bother me. She's like, yeah, they've already got their issues because of what was said about them by Percival, about them being the gang members they are, and how that affects their reputation already. And if like the White Worm gets associated with this too, it's just not trouble they need. But Tabitha was like, no, warts and all, that mean even with everything going on, it's still important to include making that one of the houses look like Pop. She's like, I was totally okay with that. And so in the end, they still helped because they believed in this project. They never backed down. And that speaks to the heart of Riverdale. That, yeah, some people, yeah, but, you're also catching people and you're feeding the darkness in people's hearts. But there's also light. And I think that's the point. What Percival's trying to do, he's trying to snuff out every bit of hope and light in this town. That's what Hiram was doing. Once again, he's just picking up the pieces to what Hiram left. Is like, oh, you guys haven't fully pieced them together. In fact, you've scotch tape the piece Riverdale back together. I'm here to start peeling that scotch tape so it can start falling apart. So what's his end goal? We still don't know. But at the end, though, Archie now knows about Jughead's ability. They're all out in the open about it. Plus, amongst each other now, this trio of heroes versus this one supervillain, which it seems like out of anyone, he's got his eyes set on, I think, all the key figures in Riverdale, all the important, pieces of this cracked armor he needs to strike, these very, very specific blows he needs to deal to the armor to make it fully fall apart. So, and I don't know whether Archie's going to be the last stop or just the next stop, but we do see at the very end he focuses on Archie. He has an idea that Jughead, he was able to confront Jughead about, which I love that he made that quote, and that Percival was like, yeah, whoever lived here and whoever made that quote didn't live in Riverdale. And then Jughead's like, it was Gandhi's quote. And Percival kind of stopped smiling for a second. It's like, oh, you look like such a dick there. Oh, you're gonna go against a quote by Gandhi, a man who, that's a whole conversation. So I just thought that was interesting. But I love that he immediately knew what Jughead was doing, and he was just like, oh, you've done rummaging through my head, you garbage person or whatever, get out of my head. So he now knows Jughead's a mind reader. He just doesn't know if that's all Jughead can do. Because their abilities can be extensions of each other. It just depends on what continuity and how far. Because being able to read someone's mind, I think that power can extrapolate and be used to eventually control people's minds, if not put stuff in people's minds, could be where that is. But that seems that's more so Percival. So mind control and being able to read minds aren't always. I think sometimes maybe they're separate abilities, but sometimes I feel like some people might have both. But I guess maybe that's just me extrapolating and assuming that they're extensions of each other when in actuality, even the cases I'm thinking of someone having both, it's just a case of, it's just them having both abilities and not the abilities being, once again, the extensions of each other. So we'll see what's up with Percival. On the flip side of things, we have the whole thing in Thornhill with Abigail and the Cheryl situation, because Britta was able to speak out to Nana Rose, to get information, which I find it so interesting, and I'm always ready for Nana Rose to betray Britta just to be in Abigail's good graces and favor again. I could definitely see that being a possibility. But because even at one point she's like, oh yeah, get my granddaughter her body back. How about you didn't give her body up to some some ancestor in the first place? You wouldn't be where you are right now. So maybe that's the only reason why she's helping, because it's like, I am a little sour about me getting locked up. So maybe that's all that is. But Britta has to travel inside of her dreams and get to Cheryl. And Cheryl is in basically a warped version of her own reality. Basically, it's her mom, and her brother. And her mom is so loving and doting at first. And it's like the moment it's like, oh, can my friend Heather come over? It's like, oh, no. But everyone else can. And it's like, right. Because your mom sent you away because of those things. So, her mom knew pretty early on, I guess, had some inklings. But it was like, no, we're going to electrocute the gay out of you. That whole thing. So, but then it gets even more warped, because when Britta comes back later on, Cheryl is in a corner crying, and her mom's like, oh, no, this is no longer her birthday, it's just Jason's. And I was like, I wonder, is that it's warped, but I'm like, is that a warped real memory? Did her mom really take her birthday away from her when she was younger? Because obviously it's Cheryl as she is now present day playing, like, I think a younger version of herself. Supposed to be playing, like, a younger version of herself, still looking like present day, just the manifestations of how she... It's just a manifestation of herself. So I'm curious, is that something real that happened, or is it just part of, like, the whole dreamscape? Because if it's real... Jason was always the favorite. Sadly, Cheryl wasn't. But I don't like her and her mom have their beef and their issues, and there's a lot there to unpack. And that ends up being a thing of why she was the perfect warden. Because later on, when she's making Jason and her clean, I'm like, was that really what she's not? She's kind of twisted, but she wasn't like. And it's like, right. I think it's Cheryl thinking like, that me and my brother were always under her iron fist and her control and her terribleness and her just being a just straight up shitty human being. So Penelope had her issues, she always has. I think a lot of that is a lot more hyperbolized to some extent. I mean, it is just your dreamscape. It's just her dreamscape's manifestation of her fears of her mom. Like, her mom, once again, has done a lot of shady stuff. So it's not that out of pocket. It's not that like out there, a lot of this. So that's how much I'm wondering how much of it is real stuff. Some of it, like even that when she was getting to scrub the floors and stuff, I think that was just like a nightmare enhanced version, not very extreme hyperbole of Penelope, but obviously her being the evil queen of sorts, I think still exists at the heart of all of it. So those are my thoughts at the very least. But luckily, Britta was able to get to Cheryl, and Cheryl was able to fight back against that fake version of her mom and break free. And now she's able to visit Britta in her dreams, which I'm a little skeptical and worried about, because I'm like, how do you know that anytime someone's visiting you being Cheryl? I was immediately thinking like, oh, either you're awake and that's Abigail pretending like, oh, so you are trying to get to Cheryl and then like you're screwed. I thought that's what was what, but it's like, no, it's really Cheryl, because Cheryl's like, I honestly have no idea how to get my body back. We just have to wait enough time until we can figure it out. So she's still in there. She hasn't, like, now she's broken free of her warded. She's free from her prison to some extent. At least she has free enough range to kind of go and do her thing. I'm wondering how long will it be before Abigail takes notice of things changing in that dreamscape. But I still feel like you could always mess with Britta a little bit by making it that one time Cheryl comes to her, but it's not actually Cheryl. It's Abigail confronting her, because it's like, right, I'm not sure if you're the one behind this, but now I'm going to confirm it by pretending to be Cheryl. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out, how this all ties together. I'm very, very excited to see where all this ends up ultimately taking us going forward into the next episode. So many threats. TBK isn't done with, as we know. Betty said she lost him in Maine, but it's only going to be a matter of time before he circles back around, because he's obsessed with Betty. She was saying like, oh, I get him to, focus on something else, he'll lose interest. I doubt that. Then you got the Percival situation, and you got the Abigail thing, so it's going to be interesting to see whether or not these stories converge. Do they stay separate? Do they all they're separate, but end up, interestingly enough, striking at the same time, all culminating in something, or how much they influence and affect each other? We'll ultimately have to wait and see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.